So good afternoon, everyone, to the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign webinar. And this is a webinar entitled Tree Height, Wetlands, and the Invasive Task Force live from New York. And we're coming in from several locations today. I'm at the NASA Wallops Flight Facility. I'm Brian Campbell, the lead for the campaign. But then also we have Mahopac High School in Mahopac, New York, going to be doing a presentation about the research they've been doing. Emily Youngberg will be presenting her research at Mahopac High School. And then we have the Cornell University Cooperative Extension with Jennifer Lerner going to be talking about their program and then how it ties back to the research that's going on at Mahopac, as well as we have the Invasive Species Task Force and Dr. Brent Boscarino, and he's going to be talking about his program and how it ties back to the research at Mahopac High School. And then we have Jeff Mapes from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Trees for Tribs program. And he's going to be talking as well about his program and how it ties back to the student research as part of the Trees Around the Globe student research campaign. So recently we released a really cool video about the campaign, and I'm going to pop that on right here. So this is kind of the first time we're going to show it during a webinar. It's actually on the Globe website. It's part of our campaign website on the Globe pages. You can find it there. It's on the landing page for our campaign. But let me show you this. This is a really cool video that was put together by actually the ICESat-2, the Ice Cloud and Land Elevation Satellite 2 outreach campaign, the outreach team, specifically a video producer on our team named Ryan Fitzgibbons. And these videos that you're going to see, the videos of trees and people and students in here, there are a lot of people from the Globe program that submitted videos from around the world. We put a call out for videos to be part of a future video. And here's a video that was put together. So a very cool video to get people interested in the campaign. And as I mentioned, a lot of those videos that you saw there were from students from around the world throughout the Globe program. So, you know, super cool to see that as part of it. We just wanted to do a little video to thank people for it and, you know, get their videos in there so everybody can see. So let's jump in quickly to some things. As you know, I always show this tree here about what the campaign is. You know, we talk about every webinar we have and everything we do, we talk about why trees, why they're important. That's where all the research comes in, where we have tree research experts. The ICESat-2 data isn't released yet, but it will be later this month. So, you know, once all that gets out there, and then we figure how best we can tie everything together with the ground-based measurements and the satellite measurements, we will bring everybody back for a webinar to get you know, people online and on base with you know, how it works, how we can do some comparisons between the tree height data that is part of the campaign and also, you know, the new Globe Observer trees tool, and then how we can use it to compare to the satellite data. Then, of course, we have the student data, which is a big part of the campaign, of course, because it's a student research campaign. And that's why Emily's going to be talking today about the work that she's been doing, research work she's been doing at Mahopac High School with their fellow students and teacher Scott Rizzo. And then we have collaborations, and we've had, you know, some collaborating schools across the world who are taking tree height measurements, doing the green up, green down, also doing the land cover. You know, those are the three major ones as part of our three major protocols that we have students measure and observe during the campaign. And then we tie all that together, and you know, that's the trees campaign. So we have lots of internal and external to NASA. You know, the Globe program, with the Globe program, you know, NASA is a major funder of it, supporter of it. And a lot of what we do is grabbing the data, getting the data from NASA and comparing it. So in the near future, what you're going to see is you're going to see an increase in being able to look at that data, as well as an increase in what are called subject matter experts, who are parts of missions like the ICET-2 mission, and scientists at different NASA centers around the United States who are going to be they're experts in the research and why we study trees, why we study land cover, things like that. So we're going to be bringing them in more and more over the next 2 years for the campaign, because as you know, the campaign runs until September 15th, 2021. So we're in the first year of it now. In the summertime, we take a little break, with webinars, because a lot of the majority of the people we get for the webinars are in the Northern Hemisphere, and a lot of schools aren't in session in the Northern Hemisphere in the summertime. For the most part, there are schools that go year long, but for the most part, they're not. So we take a little break, a month or two. We will have one in June, and but you can see that on the website. It will be actually June 12th, but a little more about that later on. I'll announce more of that next week at our next webinar. So lots of good stuff going on. And as you know, here are some guidelines that I always bring up when you measure trees. Should be at least 5 meters tall. Basically because anything smaller than 5 meters is considered a shrub. And then also trees measured should be isolated trees or the tallest trees in a large grouping of trees. So what we're really looking for, and when we're looking for trees, we want as many trees measured as possible. To compare it to ICET-2, the scientists on ICET-2 really look for a high concentration of trees in an area where we get the tree height measurements for. So we're looking at that data density to look while measuring tree height. So we can really look at that satellite data and then compare the ground-based measurements to that satellite data. We're not really validating the satellite. We're not validating the satellite data. What we're doing is we can do comparisons between what we see from the satellite and what we see on the ground using the measurements. So validation is a complex thing, and we don't want to get into that. We just want to do some comparisons. So some guiding investigative questions. I won't go through all of these, but these are on the website, but they're things to help you guide your research through exploration of these questions. So here I'm going to announce every time, we have here are the top April 2019 measurements for tree height, degreening, and land cover. We have up here top left, these are the countries where the tree heights were coming from. And this isn't as part of the Globe Observe. These are people who are part of the campaign, through the student side of things, where the measurements are coming from. And then greenings, and then land cover, because as you know, with the NASA Globe Observer Citizen Science app, we have the trees tool and we have the land cover tool, and there's a lot more countries that are part of it. So these are countries with participants of the campaign submitting at least 5 measurements, and that's where these are coming from. So as you know, April, we had an intensive observation period for land cover, and that just finished up at the end of the month, and we had a total of 664 land cover measurements from April 1st to the 30th of 2019. And our winner, who is outside of the NASA team, because we have a bunch of people, we do a lot of testing internally to our NASA team, and we have a lot of measurements from us doing a lot of testing and going out and making sure everything's working all right. But it's Jeff Bauman out of Shoemate Middle School in Gibraltar, Michigan in the United States. So he has the most land cover measurements for the month of April. So congratulate Jeff if you see him or if you email him. And Jeff just happened to have been in the United States on the Weather Channel yesterday morning. He was being recognized as an exceptional teacher working with the Weather STEM program and the GLOBE program as part of Teacher Appreciation Week in the United States this week. So he was actually on with weather personalities and weatherman Jim Cantori, and they were talking about all about what he does in the classroom. So it was very cool. They mentioned GLOBE, mentioned doing research campaigns. So it was very cool about Jeff being on there. So congratulations to Jeff Bauman for being the April winner of the intensive observation period for land cover. And as you know, the trees tool is live now. We have over 2,500 tree height observations since March 26th when it was released. So, you know, if you're using the Globe Observer Citizen Science app, keep it going. You know, take those measurements because we're looking at those literally every day. Our team is looking at those every day. Our next webinar, and it will be with Marcus Schuster. He is from Switzerland, and he is actually on this webinar right now, and it will be on Tuesday, May 14th. So we're doubling up this month. Since we didn't have one last month, we were focusing on the intensive observation period. That's why we wanted to get two this month. So today and next Tuesday, and notice the time, it's different than today, but it's Tuesday, May 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time or 4 p.m. UTC. And this is all about the research they've been doing, that Marcus and his students have been doing. What greens up, must green down. I kind of came up with that. Greenings live from Switzerland. So it's going to talk about the green up, green down, and the greenings that they've been doing, and the work they've been doing with the phenocam. So looking at the phenology of the green up, green down protocol. So super excited to hear about that. And without further ado, let's get going on today's webinar. And it's Tree Height, Wetlands, and the Invasive Task Force live from New York. And I will stop sharing my screen now, and I will pass it over to Emily Youngberg at the Mahopac High School. Yep. Welcome, Emily.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And there we go. Okay. So, hi, my name is Emily Youngberg, and I am a senior at Mahopac High School, and I'm part of the WISE program our school does, where we could do an internship or like a project, and I decided to do mine on like water quality originally, but then I was introduced to the Trees on the Globe campaign, so I kind of shifted my research towards that instead, and I think I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot from the research I did. And so what I'm mainly going to be talking about today are mainly the first two, and if we have time, I'll get to the last two. But so mainly, first I'm going to briefly be introducing the wetlands that we usually study around our school. And then I'm also going to get more into the research that I've done with the tree heights for the Trees Around the Globe campaign. And so we are from Mahopac, New York, which is the United States of America. As you can see from this like screenshot I took from Google Maps, around right there, sort of from the northern part of the United States. And I also have this little outline of Mahopac, and we are the school that we do all this data testing from is located right here. If you follow my cursor, right around there. And so here's just an overview of our school. So our school is very wooded. We have a lot of like trees and wood around it. And we have like two sources that come to our creek, one right here that goes this way and one that goes down this way, and our water goes this way out of to a ravine and out towards a river. Okay, and then so where we mainly take our data collection sites is from pre-pond and post-pond, because we like to see how different pre-pond is to post-pond when it goes through the pond, because there are many factors that can contribute to like certain differences, like in temperature and in like DO. So we like to test from those two sites. And so here's just an image from one of our sites from pre-pond. It is a shrub wetland. It's a shrub wetland. And if you look, you see a lot of like the scrubs. These are just from different or shrubs from different time periods. This one's from winter. This is in between winter and spring. And this one is in spring. This was like 2 weeks ago. And then this one is of our post pond, which is like a limited riparian buffer. And if you could see here that it's all kind of along there, which prevents like trash from getting in and excessive runoff from the neighboring neighborhood. And so now I am mainly going to get into the Trees Around the Globe campaign, which is the main thing I focused on during my internship. And I didn't really know that the Trees Around the Globe campaign was going on until Mr. Connick introduced it to me around February, and we started kind of toying around with it, and I ended up wanting to do it. So I'm really excited to share what I found and all the research I've been doing so far with it. So I know you brought up the guiding investigative questions before, and I'm going to bring them up again because I mainly focused on two when I did my research. And the first one is, what can measuring tree height tell us about our local ecosystem? And the other one were, what are the tools for measuring trees and the areas between them? And so the first one I'm going to get into is, what can measuring tree height tell us about our local ecosystem? Because I measured trees from a different area, not really from pre or post, but while I was doing investigative work, I actually found something that involved the tree heights around the certain areas, especially pre-pond. And so here's some of the data I took from the Globe website. And the blue one is the pre-pond site, and the red one is the post-pond site. And if you look at the pre-pond one, the data range is does not vary as much as the post-pond one. And we think it's because that when post-pond mainly comes from our pond area, which gets a lot of sunlight and has no shade. So a lot of the water there sits there before eventually goes to our post-pond, which causes the higher temperatures compared to pre-pond, which doesn't see that much light compared to post because the light always shines on post. And then here's also data we compiled together of our summers. So this is just our summer data from 2012 to 2014. And if you look, you can also see that due to there not being much shade at post-pond, the degree difference, especially in the summer, is about 2 degrees Celsius higher than pre-pond, which has more shade. And so we also see our DO is also affected, because since our temperature readings are affected by the shade, we see that sometimes our DO is definitely affected by the trees. And so while I'm going to get more into my height measurements and the research I did for heights. So I had a field procedure and a math procedure I followed every single time I went out and did the tree measurements. I'd go out every school day with the app, or the app I selected to use. I would go to the spot for the designated tree. I'd calibrate at the bottom of the tree. I'd mark the bottom of the tree at 0 degrees. I move up the phone until the top of the tree is shown, and I'd lock the screen so the angle and the tree is shown. And then I also had a math procedure, which was I did distance from the tree times tan to that degree for the given day. And I had to add any height if necessary, because for some of the trees, it wasn't at a level ground, or we didn't measure from the bottom of the tree due to like obstacles, or if it was on a level ground. So then I had to add some of the height that we missed out of. And so now I'm going to get into that second question I focused on, which are, what are the tools for measuring trees and the areas between them? So I explored 3 different instruments throughout my research, and I'm going to get into like the pros and cons I found for them and the experiments I did with them. So the original one I used is this app on the App Store, which was called the Chronometer plus Bubble Level app, and it's credited to be made by Peter Brittenling, if I say last name correctly. And so the pros I found for this, it allows the user to zero out the angle location. So you just go to the bottom and you'd hit like this button right here, which would zero it out. And then, and you also do not have to count strides every time, as you could pre-measure distance, which enables you to get the heights from a non-level ground, because a lot of the trees I measured weren't like on a level ground, like there's obstructions or just wasn't level. And the thing is with the cons is that it was not the official Globe app, and some of the angles potentially change depending on the phone you use, which we figured out after one time we went out and tried to do it. We saw there was some variation with the angles. And so now I want to talk about the official Globe Observer app, which I didn't actually know it came out until too late in my research. But some of the pros is that it is the official Globe app, And what you also don't have to do is that you do not have to pre-measure the distance. So it's good for taking a great amount of tree heights. So like if you be like, oh, I want to get these tree heights, you don't have to measure it, then do it. You could just use your strides. And it's also the easiest way to put data online, because you could just, once you fill out everything and you do the process to doing the app, and then you have everything, and then you could just finish it and upload it right there. But some of the cons I found is that it uses stride length to measure distance, which is a good idea, but for me, I didn't really like my stride length does sometimes vary, because sometimes I walk faster, or my stride lengths are sometimes bigger or slow or shorter. So I didn't really like that about it. And sometimes, and I realized you have to measure trees that are kind of on a flat ground that have no obstructions. For example, for one of the trees, there was an obstruction that we had to measure around, and it might not have worked with using the Globe app. And the final one I looked at was a paper and ball chronometer, which is your standard one, which you look up from a straw and try to see the top and someone else reads it. So some of the pros that it's cheap and easy to make and very accessible for people who may not have a phone on hand. It's also great for group work, because you need 2 people to use it. So it's good for if you want to do like for research for like a class with a group, it's good because then everyone can get involved in it. But some of the cons is that it could not be as accurate, because it doesn't show all of all the small lines for all the angles that it could be. And it's hard to read if a person's hands are shaking. And it's also really bad for solo work. So that's one of the reasons I didn't really think about using this one, because I'd be going out by myself and measuring these tree heights. And so I also to find out which one I was more accurate than the others, I put them through several experiments to see which one I found out was more accurate. So we put together one originally with the first chronometer app and the paper and ball chronometer. And so we went in Mr. Rizzo's classroom and we measured out a right triangle. So we measured the distance from the wall and the hypotenuse of the wall. So once we had all those measurements, we were able to mathematically figure out what the angle should be. And so then we used the original chronometer app I used for most of my research and the paper and ball chronometer to see which one was better and more mathematically accurate. And so here's just some pictures from the experiment. This was from the spot where we measured from, and on this one, if you look closely, you could see our tape measure when we measured out the distance from the wall. And on the bottom is where I put my diagram where we did the wall, and then we did the hypotenuse, and we put all the data there, and kind of spoils the results that I'm going to show on the next slide. But here's my results for the experiment. And so the paper and ball chronometer only read 21 degrees, while the chronometer app read 24 degrees, and the actual degrees was 24.302. So ultimately, I found that the app was closer to the what the actual angle was. And so I found that it might be better for the study I would eventually go on to do compared to the paper and ball chronometer. And I also, like I said before, I wasn't aware of the Globe app and that it was able to do tree heights until late in my research. So I want to be consistent with my data, so I did not end up using it when I did most of my data. But we did do an experiment to test the accuracy / precision of the Globe app to compare it to the chronometer app I had been using. And according to my experiment, we did one where it was the wall height, which we got was 2.75 meters. The Globe app was 3.25 meters, and the chronometer app that time when I did it was 2.58 meters. So we found out the chronometer app was slightly more accurate, but that could have been due to a multitude of factors, such as my stride length at that given time. But so during this research, I looked at multiple trees and I tried to see if I could get their growth rate and ultimately their height. So the first one I looked at was a box elder tree, and its scientific name is the Acer negundo. So Acer negundos or box elder trees do have a relatively high growth rate when young, about 0.6 meters or more a year, and they often grows around moist areas such as lakes or streams. And this particular tree can reach up to 21 meters high, but is often usually around 12 to 15 meters. Okay, so when I did this experiment, I tried to show the data in two ways. I tried to do an average height of what I got and an actual graph to see if I could get its growth rate, see if it was growing or if it was just steady. And according to my data, I'm pretty sure it's growing still, or it's growing, but
those are the numbers you have.
yeah, but those are the numbers I did get, and sometimes there were some outliers but that could have been due to a multitude of errors that could have occurred when I was doing this project. So another one I measured was a Norway spruce, and its scientific name is the Picea ibeus, and it's technically not native to North America. But it was brought over, and its mature heights vary, but can reach up to 12.192 to 18.288 meters. And it tends to prefer acidic and alkaline soil, and its growth rate varies depending on the source you look at, but it is around 0.3 to 0.9 meters per year under the best conditions. And this one, originally we didn't know what the type of spruce this was, but after an investigation and looking at several books and looking online, we were able to identify as mostly likely being a Norway spruce due to its pine cones, as they range from 4 to 5 inches, and the tree had a lot of similar characteristics to the Norway spruce. And so for this one, I did test, since this one had level ground, I did test it with the Globe app and my actual app. So the one time I did with the Globe app, I got around 10.66 meters. Then for my average height, for when I used the other app, I got around 13.09 meters. And for my graph to see if there was a growth rate, there most likely is still growing, but if you see, mainly not by a lot. And so the third tree I measured was a northern red oak tree, and scientific name is the Quercus rubra. And its growth rate, although I was not able to find a definite growth rate, it is rapid, and it can reach up to 18.29 meters to 21 meters, and is native to North America. And I was able to actually find a picture from 2009, and it definitely looks like it has grown, especially in its diameter. So its average height is around 20.05 meters. And for this one, I did have, it's for the line best fit, it does show that it is going a little bit lower, but I think that may be due to the outlier at the beginning, due to a possible error I had, which I will talk about a little bit later. And the final tree we did test was a tulip tree, or tulip tree poplar as another name it's often called, and scientific name is the Liriodendron tulipifera. It does have a very fast growth rate, reaching heights up to 45.72 meters in a forest. So these types of trees usually grow higher in a forest, and it could be potentially one of the tallest American hardwoods. And it thrives in slightly acidic soil and rich soil. And back in the day, it was often used for boat making and lumber because of its really tall height. And so the average height I got for this one was 41.63 meters. And I don't have that many data points on it from this time period, from that period over there. But this one was mainly consistent, and it did show maybe a positive growth rate. And this is the one I was talking about where there was obstruction because there was a fence, and then it kind of dipped down. So me and Mr. Rizzo had to measure the distance between the fence and the tree. And then we also had to add on at the bottom what distance or height of the tree was below where I could see, so then I could add it on every time I did the average height. And so there were definitely sources of error during my experimentation, some of the times at the beginning especially, which can contribute to why there's some outliers at my beginning especially, was because I did miscalibrate at the beginning, but I quickly fixed that and calibrate the app before every reading. And the calibration was not initially applied, like I said. So I had to mark the angle measuring site for tree height more effectively and I allowed to make it easier to see the constant spot being measured, because for each of these trees, we measured from a certain point every single time. And we put like a wooden stick in the ground for 2 of them. And I put the spot on the ground for 1 more. And for the last one, we used a rock. But so basically at the beginning, we had like 6 in the ground, but it was hard to see because they blended into the ground. And sometimes when the mowers went up, they pushed it over, so it was hard to see. So I eventually added I added masking tape to make it easier to see. And for some of them, especially at the beginning, it was hard to see, so I might have measured from slightly forward or backwards. And then other factors that could have affected results that were most of the time out of my control, or especially winds, if the wind was blowing, so the tree looked like it was, so I couldn't get the top of the tree exactly, or if the sun was in the way, it was hard to see like exactly where the top of the tree was because I had to squint. And other things such as human error, such as when I said before, if someone else were to measure it, which did happen once, which is why there might be a slight dip in the graph. We found that out because it's really specific on like who measures it. And I also have suggestions for further research. And so one of the ones I had was adding a new day collection site in the ravine, especially to test the effects of trees on the ecosystem in our campus. Because I would like to see if the unshaded in the front versus a tree shaded on the side, because in our ravine, there's like tons of trees. It's basically a forest. But in our front, we have almost no trees and no shade. So I want to see maybe if we compare an extremely shaded portion of our water to an unshaded, how different that temperature would be compared to the shrub of pre-pond and the no shrub of like post-pond. And so I also have one more, which is expanding the range of trees measured, especially to growing trees, to see if we'd be able to see growth over time. Because most of the trees I measured were trees that are most likely growing at little amounts now or aren't growing at all. So I feel like if we had done this growing trees that we know are going to grow, we might have seen a bigger growth rate, especially over time. And so that's all I kind of want to talk about today. So now I'm going to bring it over. I'm going to bring over to Mr. Connick, who's going to especially talk about some of the invasive species he's been working on.
Yeah, she has more stuff, but I'm looking at the clock, so we're going to make sure we have everybody here. I'm going to kind of get to the end, and then hopefully we can have our people that are with us today. I'm Mr. Connick, for those of you that don't know me. I'm a retired teacher at Mahopac High School. What we have in New York, and that's a big problem, is in this case it's a porcelain berry vine, which you can see on the left side. It just grows up trees and just takes them down. And this is why this study is so important, because obviously we can see that on the right side, you have a little healthier tree and all. So you can see the vines, some of them are very large. They can, easily take down trees. This is going up to Connick State Parkway. You can see the one area in the front, which the vines have just kind of gone up the trees and destroyed them. Normally this is what it looks like, but because of these vines, this area could be very changed over the years. It'd be nice to have someone maybe taking measurements here and then with your satellite, compare the two. This is important because we're in the watershed. This is the New York City reservoir system. And so this supplies water for about 10% of New York City. And you can see it's surrounded by trees. So obviously that's very important. And that's why what these kids are doing is so important as well. I don't know who you want to turn it over to next, Bri, but.
Yep. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Bob. A couple questions, Emily. We had one from Brent. So he said, did you expect to see measurable growth within the time span of your project? And did you expect measurable growth within a few weeks with the methods that you were using?
I wasn't expecting to see like that much growth, but I'm hoping that if maybe like if people continue measuring those trees, or if they measure different trees that they know are growing, they'll most likely see a bigger growth rate than what I saw, because I didn't use growing trees. I didn't realize that, oh, there might not be that big of a growth rate until after I did it. And what was the second one again?
Did you expect measurable growth within a few weeks using the methods that you did?
No, I'm not. Probably not. Not
Okay.
sure.
Thank you. I have a quick question. When you were looking at the box elder, the red oak, and the tulip tree, were there leaves always on the trees, or when you started, were there no leaves on the trees when you started, and then they grew?
When I started, there were no leaves on the trees, but now there are a lot more leaves on the trees.
Sure. Yeah, which can affect the height a little bit, you know, depending upon, you know, the top part of that crown of the tree. Yeah. So great. And I should also mention that with the Globe Observer app, you can actually measure it when you're not on level ground, because, you know, the phones have a built-in, you know, gyroscope. You know, the majority of phones, not all of them across the world do, but they have it. So, you know, we designed it that, you know, you get the angle to the bottom of the tree, you get the angle to the top of the tree, and then it takes into account then your pace, you know, your steps to the tree, as well as, you know, the height of how high you're holding it at your eye level. So, yeah. Another question with the Apple app that you used, did it say where to hold the phone? Was it just at eye level to look?
It's at eye level then.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because that's one thing we do, you know, with the app, with the Globe Observer app, you know, we stress that when you look at the top of the tree, you know, I don't know if anybody can see my phone, but you keep it at eye level and look at the bottom of the tree like this, and then we look at the top of the tree like this without putting your hands up, because that'll drastically change the angle of the tree, therefore, you know, changing the tree height pretty dramatically. So, yeah. So awesome. Yeah.
From my eye height.
Okay, great. Awesome job, Emily. Thank you so much for this. It's great research, and can't thank you enough. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer Lerner of the Cornell Cooperative Extension. Hello, Jennifer.
Let me unmute myself. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you.
Good. I'm viewing Emily's screen,
Yes,
so
Emily,
you're going to pass me. Okay, great.
Emily, go ahead and unshare, and then you can share your screen.
Right. Unshare it.
Just go up top here. Where it says.
And as we go ahead and work out the glitches here, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Jen Lerner. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Putnam County, and I am a natural resource and horticulture educator. And I am looking for the place where, here, I'm going to share my screen.
Yep. All the way at the bottom in the little green.
Okay, here it comes. And let me pick this one. So I don't know what you're seeing, but maybe I'll go into presenter's view and you'll be able to see. Great. How's that?
We see the presenter mode. Can you switch swap displays?
Sure. Let me see if I could.
If you just exit out of that and just start it up, just where it says start from the beginning.
Okay.
It's a tricky little gadget for sure.
Sorry. Yeah, let's see if I can go back. I don't know if you can see what I'm
just hit the slideshow and then click that all the way to the left right there.
Let's see if that'll, it just keeps wanting to go to presenter's view, doesn't it?
So look at the display setting up here. Maybe it says on the left side here, display settings.
Mute, start video. Okay. All right. I don't see display settings up there. What if I do from present online? That might be dangerous.
Yeah,
okay. Don't touch that button.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, it's all good. So if you hit just hits from the beginning and we see the presenter mode, that's fine, because the important stuff here. So yeah.
So
We're
try to ignore all that other stuff that
We're good.
I'm showing you. Okay. Unfortunately, I can see the other slides really beautifully, so I wish you could see as well. But I'm Jen Lerner. As I said, a senior resource educator, and I just wanted to talk briefly about how we collaborated with the students at Mahopac High School over the years. A lot of the folks who worked alongside me, sorry about the noise behind me, there's trucks backing up, are Master Gardener volunteers. And Master Gardener volunteers are part of our outreach program. We're individuals in the community with a real strong interest in natural resources, invasive species, plants, and education in general. So we do focus a lot on invasive species. They are everywhere in all kinds of walks of our life. So that's part of what we talk about in terms of tree and forest health. So some of the researchers that we collaborate with also at the university level are looking at invasive species and forest health, or species diversity and ecosystem resilience. We also have deer everywhere here. So as Emily and others are looking at trees that have successfully grown tall enough to be measured, we're watching our forest floor and seeing that our young trees are being browsed down. So they're really not having an opportunity to grow, so unless they're protected. So while we are trying to promote native plants, we recognize that the deer are coming along and nipping up everything that's within their reach other than the invasive species themselves. So as we work with the students, we realize that as gardeners, we have a lot to do with how some of these invasive species got here and the impacts that they're having on our forest. So when we think about those earthworms that we showed earlier on, for a lot of us, it was like, oh, a worm, it's a great thing, but it also has a really big impact on forest health because of the way it consumes organic matter in the forest floor and is feeding on the fine roots of the forest floor as well. So as we look to collaborating in the future, we understand that a lot of our work has to do with battling those invasive species and looking at how they're really impacting tree growth, forest growth. So we do have Master Gardener volunteers here as well, but Cornell Cooperative Extension also has Master Forest Owners and Master Naturalists, all of whom are really focused on working with youth and homeowners and landowners. So that is actually a photo of our most recent attempt at battling back some invasive species at the Mahopac site. Emily was talking about the pond and upstream and then downstream as well, that there are a lot of invasive species impacting the plant growth there. So over the years, we've worked with students at the high school to facilitate plant choices and student learning so that students could really take a look at what can grow in that area, what native trees and shrubs we could choose from, and which beautiful little plants we could stick in as well. This last week, we just were able to plant some iris as well in the garden, in the riparian buffer. And then lastly, I will say that we are really willing to roll up our sleeves. The students work really hard to promote native plant species and reduce the invasives there. So we helped along with the next gentleman who will talk with you to work on some of those invasive species. But one of the things that I like to talk about is that we, as Cornell Cooperative Extension, really work hard to tap into Cornell University resources and develop those relationships between both local organizations and campus-based organizations and promote collaboration between everybody. So we may not we're happy to roll up our sleeves, but sometimes the best thing we can do is just hook people up together, and that can really get a lot of change made. So that was my brief introduction to how we were engaged with the Mahopac High School students. Are there any questions? I know it was fast, but I was told, make it fast.
You might have any questions for Jennifer, you can go ahead and unmute, or if you're not comfortable with that, just pop it into the chat box and we can get back to it towards the end.
Great.
But yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. That really shows, there's so many things affecting the forest and the trees that not everybody thinks about. Invasive species are coming in from all different angles, and, to study those and understand what's going on is super vital to, understanding how that ecosystem is thriving, how healthy the forests are. So yeah, it's down here in, Maryland, and I'm probably up in New York too, Maryland and Virginia, we see mistletoe everywhere.
Oh, wow. Not up here. Yeah.
No, yeah, we see it everywhere. And we just saw some, my wife and I saw some the other day. We're like, yeah, there's mistletoe growing on there now. It's a parasite. So, it's one of those things that kills off parts of the trees. So,
right.
Yeah.
And the deer too, because of the lack of predators, the deer having such a huge impact on our forest here. So that's something people don't often think about, So, great. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, let me pass it on now to Brent Boscarino, PhD from the Invasive Species Task Force. And go ahead and take it away, Brent.
All right. Can you guys see my screen okay? All right.
Yep.
Emily, I want to say your work is awesome. Prior to working with the Trail Conference, I was actually a teacher and got to work with students and doing both like outreach and education, having to do with invasive species, but a lot of citizen science-based stuff. Down here is a picture of me, even though I don't have video here. And just really seeing the value of outreach and kids getting involved with, touching base with nature and getting back out there again. Also running some research programs and just inspiring that generation to kind of get out there and do some good work. You should be very proud of yourself, Emily. I just wanted to point that out. Doing good stuff. That sense of wonder that I saw in working with kids, how does that translate into adult life? And a lot of what we do here at the Trail Conference and with Lower Hudson Prism, which I'll introduce in a second, is like, how do we get that, that sort of childlike quality of wonder about nature? And how do we inspire adults to get out there and work with students and other partners to look at invasive species and connect with nature again? The Trail Conference, who I work for, has a lot of volunteers and members. We're an organization that has over 2,500 active volunteers, managing all sorts of trails in New York and New Jersey, from places where we're working in the Appalachian Trail, Highlands Trail in New York and New Jersey. Within our bigger group of the Trail Conference, we also host before I get to that, so a lot of what we do is just developing and building, maintaining trails, and educating the public about good trail use and proper trail use. But we also coordinate the regional response to invasive species. And that's where our organization, which is called a PRISM, which is a Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, we're down here in the Lower Hudson region of New York, and we form a lot of different partnerships with organizations, sometimes, working with school groups, but other times, working with different organizations that have, an invested interest in protecting our environment and protecting our parks and trail systems. So we have over 50 regional partners. Actually, Jen, who you just heard from, is a partner with us, and it's awesome having such expertise to look at invasive species as an issue and how to manage that. So some of what we do is removing and controlling. I know that Bob was mentioning invasive vines are taking over the natives that we're seeing, and certainly that's part of what we do, prioritizing and controlling how to manage that, but also a lot of surveying and mapping work. Where are the invasives? What's coming in? What should be the priorities? Part of what I do as citizen science coordinator is teaching outreach and informing the public about what to look for, and then, coordinating what to do about it. And that's where, working with schools like you and increasing knowledge, especially in our nation's youth, as to how, what to do about it and what are the next steps to take. And that's why part of what you're doing, Emily, and part of this organization is great. So certainly protecting native species is a big mission of ours. We have a lot of different citizen science programs. We train a lot of volunteers around here how to recognize different invasive species. We have interns working for our organization and mapping over, unfortunately, I don't know how to get out of the view that I'm seeing is of people right in the middle of my screen. So I can't really see a lot of this PowerPoint, but Let's see here. Oh, and now we're stalled out. I'll just have to click. Sorry. Let's see if I can go. Oh, there we go. So some of our accomplishments in the citizen science program and what we're doing is training volunteers as to how to recognize invasive species. We have an aquatics section in addition to removal of terrestrial invasives and managing invasive species in parks and trail systems. And one of the things that we are really looking for is for volunteers to go out there and to detect what invasive species are in our region. And remember that we're in the lower Hudson part of New York. We have what is called an invasive strike force and a couple of different ways to survey. We're using the mobile app iNaturalist, and for students out there using this device, which is amazing, just basically taking pictures of something and identifying which species are out there and uploading that to a site. And then doing standard surveys where we go out and identify. We have different levels of that. You can be at standard or intermediate or most advanced at blockbuster, and really just learning how to recognize the species that are out there. And what that ends up doing is we can survey for invasive species along trails or in schools or in these regions and parks where they're invasives, and then tracking where they are. And that helps our crews then go out, and our removal crews, and with the help of volunteers like you guys, as to what to do. We've got vines all over our native trees and taking over our ecosystems. How do we get rid of them? So we use that to build maps of invasive species in our area. And this is just a look at all the invasives observations from all our volunteers in our region. And then we take that map and that data information, and we use it to map it along the trails, regions of high infestation. And then we can get where we can get our crews out, like say your schoolyard or, a park that has, an infestation that we can go out and take care of. Tiering our species in terms of likelihood of invasiveness and likelihood of spread, and then get our core volunteers out there to go actually and do some removals. And these are just some pictures of our trail crews working and working with schools like Mahopac and some of the other partners and land managers that need help with removing invasive species from their property, so we can have these native trees, plants, shrubs coming back and not being smothered out by some of the pictures that we were seeing before. So, and we use those maps from the surveys to go target these areas so we can go out and do removals. Just some quick pictures of some before and afters, removing garlic mustard, for example, making our trails nice and clean. There's another park system that we worked at. So this is where our organization steps in and helps to manage different lands and hopefully get to the point where we're managing these invasives and bringing our natives back. That's it for me. I don't know if you guys have questions. I know I was trying to be super quick. I got a lot more I can do, but being victorious over this battle sometimes is pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is great. And this brings me to the point where I'm thinking, for those of you, in other states and other countries who are part of this and who will be listening to this webinar later, go and seek out groups like this and organizations like this in your local area that are looking at your local ecosystems in this way, looking at everything from invasive species to forest health, to wildlife management, wild health, and work with them, interact with them, take measurements, take observations and report what you find to them. It may help them out, in their goals. So, and to understand your environment better. So, so thank you so much, Brent. That was great.
All right, thanks. I will stop sharing this.
If anybody has any questions, go feel free and pop it in the chat. And now I will pass it over to Jeff Mapes with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Trees for Trips program. Are you there, Jeff?
All right, I'm trying to unmute.
I got you. I can hear you.
Okay, let me just get this shared.
Right.
thinking about it. Still thinking. Sorry, my computer is delaying a little bit, so maybe I'll just kind of jump in and start talking through it, and hopefully my computer will catch up and I can show you some of the nice photos that I had in the presentation.
Sounds good.
So I work with a program that we call Trees for Tribs, and through that program, we're providing native trees and shrubs for volunteers to plant along streams in New York with a goal of improving water quality and wildlife habitat and flood and climate resiliency. We work on both public and private lands to improve the riparian areas. The program started All right. Hopefully this will, there we go. All right.
Looks good.
So we started in 2007. It was part of our Hudson River Estuary program. So the Hudson River is an estuary for the first, I think it's about 120 miles up to the dam in the city of Troy. And that program started planting along tributaries to the Hudson in 2007. And then in 2011, we started to work on expanding the program to cover the whole state. And we also happened to, as we were preparing for that, have a few major rain events come through in the form of hurricane or tropical storms Irene and Lee, and then the following year, Superstorm Sandy down that hit New York City in that area pretty hard. So we've happened to expand the program right at an opportune time. We worked with some federal funding to begin with, and then we got dedicated state funding for the statewide program in 2014. And then a couple other interesting points is last year we did our first grant round, kind of changed the format of the statewide program a little bit. And then this year, we're in the middle of rolling out our statewide Buffer in a Bag program, which is targeted at smaller projects and landowners that have a small area of stream. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. This map kind of shows you some of the areas where we've worked. So the dark blue is the Hudson River Estuary Program's program area. And then, so Mahopac is sort of, I think, is more in the green down in the southern part of the state where the Watershed Ag Council has worked a lot. And we've done, my department has, I believe, done a planting with Mahopac, as well as the Watershed Ag Council has done plantings as well with them. And then we've kind of expanded over time to other parts of the state, and then got into the grant program to expand fully statewide. And then there's an area that covers the New York City drinking water watershed west of the Hudson and the Catskill and Delaware water areas. And they have their own riparian buffer planting program called the Catskill Stream Buffer Initiative. So Trees for Tribs works where we have a landowner who needs trees. We have coordinators in the watersheds that work with those landowners, and they design a planting plan and order the trees. Then there's a planting event. That's where the volunteers and often students, both in various levels of school all the way up to university students, are often volunteers in those. And then in order to make sure that the buffer establishes, there's ongoing maintenance after the planting. So we have our site requirements are basically the site needs to be along a water body, generally within 300 feet, can be in the floodplain, and that there shouldn't be some sort of man-made structure between the planting site and the water body. And man-made water bodies, as far as stormwater ponds or drainage ditches, we exclude from the program. Generally, Trees for Tribs provides the native trees and shrubs, tree protection in the form of tree tubes, which you can see in the pictures there, as well as weed mats, which you can see in the top right picture there, the black landscape fabric that help to protect the plants as they establish. We provide support on planting day, some technical assistance, and then some educational resources. And finally, the sign that you see in the top right there to indicate Trees for Tribs planting sites. And often they have the watershed name on the sign. So over 12 years, we've planted more than 100,000 plants across the state at more than 600 sites. And we generally engaged about an average of 1,000 volunteers a year in those efforts. So unfortunately, I don't have pictures of the Mahopac site, but a little bit north of there at Millbrook, there's a planting site that was done in 2016. So the bottom left picture was when they first planted, and then the upper left picture, if you look closely, you'll see the trees are leafing out above the tree tubes. And you also will see the sign in there. And then the picture with a person in it, they did a nice interpretive panel. And then last year, we installed a photo monitoring point. So if you see the person has their cell phone up on the little bracket there, and they can take a picture of the site and email it to the email that's on the sign and give us the site number, which is on the sign. And then on the DEC webpage, we're starting to build a Watch the Forest Grow initiative, where you can start to see sites as they grow over time. And the web address will be at the end of my presentation. One interesting thing that we did over the last few years is built with the help of our state's natural heritage program. We did a statewide riparian opportunity assessment, which was basically trying to help us focus our planting efforts. So the picture on the right kind of shows, I'll back up one moment. We did an analysis with a variety of ecological health factors and ecological stress factors, and then created a composite score. So the picture on the right with the full state, the darker the blue, the higher the ecological health scores, and then our composite scores, and the darker red is the lower the composite score. And then on the left, we went into some sub-watersheds, and I forget the exact HUC level, but that's all on the website for the project. And within that sub-watershed, they're all rated against just the sub-basins within that area, and not for the full state. So you start to see within a smaller and smaller geographic area how the health compares within that smaller area. And I definitely encourage you to the web address there. There's a section on that page with titled Statewide Riparian Opportunity Assessment. And there's a link to our Natural Heritage Programs webpage that has all of the products from this project, as well as a webinar that gives you some background instruction, and probably tells you more about it in a better way than I can put it in a short time. And then some changes that we've done in the last couple of years. Last year we did our first round of grants. So we did 10 grants totaling over $379,000. And then this year, the buffer in a bag, I think it's next week, we'll be mailing out a total of 481 bags, which is more than 6,300 trees and shrubs to people all around the state. And they'll be able to plant those on their riparian area. And there's all of my contact info and the Trees for Tribs webpage addresses there at the bottom.
That's amazing. And, you know, all these combined presentations, I wish every location, you know, around the world would have such a robust and dense set of, you know, organizations like all of you come from, you know, to understand your environment and ecosystem better and get rid of the nasty things, those invasive species, and, you know, plant trees and all that. Man, this is absolutely amazing. So thank you all so much. So any questions for any of the speakers today? Oh, you were done, weren't you, Jeff? Sorry, I just got kind of jumped. I just kind of jumped in. Sorry about that.
I'm done.
Yeah, sorry. I saw the last slide. I figured such. Okay. Anybody have any questions for any of the presenters today? And as you know, a lot of people will view this after the fact, and those of you who aren't normally on the webinars, what happens is I'll get a recording from the Zoom platform later today or first thing tomorrow, and I will put it up on the Globe website, and I'll shoot an email out to everyone to say it's there to take a look at. And that's when a lot of people start coming in and viewing the video on the Globe website, or you know, or going to YouTube where I actually post it. So we get a lot of people looking at it after the webinar, because, you know, it's impossible to find a perfect time for everyone to be here in person. So thank you all so much, and hopefully, you know, we'll all, you know, we'll keep up to date on everything that goes on with these programs for sure. You know, and then of course we have, you know, 2 more years of the campaign, so we'd love to see, you know, some future things with some of the groups here, you know, at future webinars in the next couple of years. So that'd be great. So any last minute thoughts from the speakers or last minute questions from the participants? And I want to thank Bob for bringing everybody together, and Mr. Rizzo for, you know, coordinating some things as well. So thank you so much to everyone. This is a great webinar, and you all are a great asset to the campaign, and especially to New York and, you know, rest of the world for understanding what's going on.
Yeah, no, listen, we love doing this, and the fact you've given this great opportunity for our kids and the apps, you know, trying in technology. I mean, that's the whole big push now, the STEM with, you know, teaching and all, and the hands-on, there's no question. The hands-on learning is the best. But I also want to thank you. You guys had a poem, Trees, by Joyce Kilmer, the first part of it. And I started checking out some of his work, and the trees, what an excellent poem. And I'm going to have to check more of his work out.
Great. All right. So if nobody has anything else, anybody else, anything else? Sorry. No?
Em, anything?
No.
No, you're fine.
I was going to say.
No, it's awesome.
I was going to say how much this, like, program allowed me to, like, see, like, kind of what I want to do and how, like, great the environment is and how much I learned from it. So thank you for putting this, like, campaign together, because I did learn a lot about it and all the technology you guys use and things like that. So thank you for putting this all together.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thanks for presenting and doing the great research that you did. And that's, you know, we need more people like you, Emily, to, you know, get out there and do research. You know, kids like to be outside, but, you know, nowadays a lot of kids like to be inside. There's lots of distractions. My son's 11 years old, and there's lots of distractions from going outside. So, yeah, I'm convincing him more and more, you need to get outside, you know, a little bit more. So, yeah.
You know, I don't do anything active. I like reading outside. So.
There you go. Find a nice tree.
Yeah.
Find a nice tree.
Yeah, find a nice tree, right. All right, I'm going to stop recording in 3, 2, 1, and